Thesis for this morning, for the morning session, is from Grace. And wow, it's been fun to watch her thesis kind of develop over the semester. Sort of changing a little bit and going here and there, but it's turned out really well. Grace would like to thank some people. Let me find her. Grace says, I would like to thank my advisor, Ms. Denise Strickland, for assisting me in my thesis journey this year, my friends who supported me through my journey, and the teachers who have assisted me in giving me valuable insights. Her thesis title, An Eye for an Eye Makes Justice Blind. A life for a life is morally maligned. So here's Grace. Grace, I'll get the timer set up and I'll let you know when you can start. All right, you can start whenever you're ready.
Imagine this. Your house is engulfed in flames. You hear your children screaming inside, but you can't save them. Smoke blinds your eyes. Heat sears your skin. And in the midst of chaos, you lost all three of them. Your children, gone. While you're so drowning in grief, the state turns on you. They arrested you for murder. They say you set the fire. The evidence? Flawed science. Speculations. No confessions, just a theory. And as you wait for the lethal injections in your final moments, you are the only one that's aware of one thing, that you are innocent. This is a tragic reality for Cameron Todd Willingham. He was executed in 2004 for a crime he did not commit. Only after his death did experts confirm what he'd always been saying was true, that the fire was an accident, that he was innocent. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. If even one innocent life can be taken out by a justice system meant to protect, should the death penalty exist at all? The death penalty is often justified by the ultimate punishment for the worst crime, a callous to deter violence. But what if it's not? What if, instead, it fails to deter the crime rate, is unjust towards the marginalized, and risks irreversible damage? And when the punishment is final, how can we justify a system that allows no second chances? The death penalty has existed for centuries, with ancient Greece using brutal methods such as whipping and beheading. Historical texts supported it, such as the Code of Hammurabi, which declared an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life. Or even the Bible in Genesis 9, verse 6. Whoever sheds human blood, shall their blood be shed by humans. However, over time, alternatives towards the execution began to emerge. In medieval Europe, the benefit of clergy allowed people who could read to avoid being executed. And in Japan, exiles often replaced death. With the Enlightenment era emerging in the 1700s, thinkers began to think whether the death penalty was effective or just at all. In the 20th century, public executions were banned in many countries, and nations started to replace the death penalty with other alternatives. The death penalty, or capital executions, is often defined as the legal execution of someone convicted of a serious crime punishable by death. Death sentence is where the official decision of the court when they execute that individual. While many people often see justice as delivering punishment, it's more than just retribution. Justice is also about prevention, rehabilitation, and doing the good for society. Although intended for justice for severe crime, this punishment is deeply flawed. Its irreversible nature means innocent people can and have been wrongfully executed. The death penalty raises ethical and moral and human rights concerns due to its irreversible nature. While some see it as justice for a victim's family, it often deepens the pain for both sides. Instead of healing, it adds more trauma. True justice should be fair and careful. But the death penalty risks executing the innocent, ignores the chance for rehabilitations, and replaces mercy with finality, even when there's no true certainty. Although some still defend the capital punishment, the world is slowly moving away from it. In 2023, it is recorded that more than 100 countries have abolished the death penalty, while the remaining 51 still continued executions. The death penalty should be abolished and replaced with alternatives that prioritize rehabilitations, as it is discriminatory, it is ineffective, and is inhumane. We often believe that justice is blind, but the reality is justice is race, wealth, and status. In the US, Black defendants are more likely to be executed, especially when the victim is white. One case stands out as this example of this injustice. George Stinney. He was a 14-year-old Black teenager and was convicted of murdering 2 young white girls in 1944. He was given no defenses, no witnesses, and an all-white jury that just took 10 minutes to decide his fate. 10 minutes. That's all it took for him to be taken out by the electric chair, where he remains to be the youngest person executed in the 20th century. Can we really call that justice? And this isn't just about history. The concept of systematic bias, racism, has been deeply engraved in our justice system. Although racism is outlawed, this bias still persists, just as they did under the apartheid in Africa, influencing who is more likely to be executed. But it's not just race. The same biases appears in Indonesia, this time to gender and class. Poor and foreign women are especially vulnerable in drug-related cases, as they are more prone to trafficking, but courts rarely see threats as defense. Meanwhile, wealthy and well-connected male offenders often receive lenient sentences justified by their contribution to society. Sounds familiar? And poverty, that's a death sentence of its own. In both the US and Indonesia, low-income defendants can't afford bail, so they are forced to rely on overworked public defenders, making them prone towards prosecutors. Meanwhile, the rich can hire skilled lawyers, negotiate lighter sentences, and walk out without receiving any punishment. It isn't about who is innocent anymore, it's about who can afford justice. Mental illnesses only adds another layer of discriminations. Laws claim to protect mentally ill defendants, but courts often see their conditions as aggravating, not mitigating. Take Rodrigo Goularte, for example. He was a Brazilian man diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, yet was executed in Indonesia despite his medical condition. Even if a diagnosis can save you, how can we claim this system is fair? So let's ask the question, is the death penalty really about justice? Or is it a mirror reflecting everything wrong about the society we trust? Race, wealth, status, mental illnesses. None of this should decide who lives and who dies, and yet they do. So, if justice really is blind, then perhaps it's time to take the blindfold off and really look into what's happening. Now, beyond being discriminatory, there's another issue with the death penalty. It doesn't even work. For something so extreme, you expect it to be effective, but it's not. It doesn't deter crime, it wastes money, and the process takes so long it defeats its own purposes. Let's start with deterrence. Many assume that harsher punishments prevents crime from happening, but numbers say otherwise. In 2004, US states with the death penalty has higher murder rates than those without. When Canada abolished its death penalty, the murder rates dropped down by 44%, while in Indonesia, drug use actually surged despite executions. If the death penalty really is effective, we'd see the opposite results. But maybe it's more cheaper, right? Wrong. Capital sentences are far more expensive than life imprisonment. Capital trials take longer, often involves more lawyers, and it took years of appeals. In California, a single execution cost taxpayers $15 million, while in Michigan, it only cost them $22,000 to house someone for life. That means, at the cost of one execution, it could fund over 680 years of life imprisonment or house over 700 inmates in a year. It's not just morally flawed, it's economically irrational. And then there's the delay. Justice delayed is justice denied, and there's nowhere truer with the death penalty. In the 1980s, the average wait time between sentencing and execution is 6 years. Now, it's more than 20. In California alone, some wait 25 years, some even longer. These delays traumatize victims' families, drains public funds, and destroy the mental health of inmates stuck in a legal limbo. So here's the truth. The death penalty isn't just unfair. It's ineffective, expensive, and outdated. It doesn't reduce crime, it wastes money, and it delays justice. Now, beyond being inefficient, there's a deeper issue within the death penalty. It's inhumane. It contradicts values basic human rights, often involves torture, and puts innocent lives at risk. Worst of all, it contradicts the very moral and religious values many people claim to protect when they supported it. International laws like the ICCPR guaranteed the right to life and protection against cruel punishment, yet countries like the US use legal loopholes to continue executions, including of minors in the past. The methods used, lethal injection, hanging, firing squad, are far from humane. A 2022 BBC investigation found that over a third of US executions that year was botched. One case stands out, Clayton Lockett, who died in agony after a failed lethal injection. That's not justice, that's torture. Even before execution, death row inmates spend years in solitary confinement, causing deep psychological damage, what experts call death row syndrome. Take Michael Ross, for example. After over 20 years alone in a cell, he gave up all of his appeals. Experts say it wasn't because he accepted his fate, but because the isolation broke him. It strips people of their humanity long before their life was taken. And sometimes, the people we executed aren't even guilty. Since 1973, at least 200 people out of 9,800 sentences in the US have been exonerated after being sentenced to death. That's nearly 4 people every year who was almost sentenced for a crime they did not commit. Though it may sound small, as it only makes up 2%, that 2% is lives, not numbers. Just this year, British citizen Peter Sullivan was exonerated after spending 38 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Convicted in 1987 of rape and murder, he was just released last week, May 13, after a DNA evidence finally proved his innocence. If Sullivan had received a death sentence, then there will be no second chances, only a state-sanctioned killing an innocent man. As Blackstone's principle reminds us, it's better than 10 people guilty escape than 1 innocent life suffer. Once an execution is carried out, there's no undoing it. And if we look at this through a moral or religious lens, the contradiction became even more clear. Some people defend the death penalty using the Bible, but they often ignore its deeper message of mercy and redemption. In John 8, Jesus stopped an execution with this word, "Let the one without sin cast the first stone." And the Bible is full of second chances. Take a look at Saul, for example. He persecuted Christians, but now he became Paul. Or even harsh verses like "an eye for an eye," or were interpreted by Jesus in Matthew, "turn to the other cheek." Especially as Christians, we should believe that there is an ultimate justice that will be meted out once we die. Truthfully, we were all under the death penalty, but God sent Jesus to save us from it. If we were given grace, shouldn't we extend that grace to others? The truth is, the death penalty isn't about justice, it's about vengeance. And vengeance has no place in a system meant to protect rights, seek truth, and reflect our highest values. True earthly justice should promote reform, not retribution. As one activist put it out, revenge is not the answer. The answer lies in reducing violence, not causing more death. Some people argue that life imprisonment poses a serious risk, especially when it comes to prison escapes. They believe that allowing dangerous individuals to live creates society concerns that could endanger society. Now, it's true that when prisons are underfunded or understaffed, prison escapes could happen. But dramatic escapes are rare and usually point out to issues like poor staffing or outdated security, not to the flaws of the punishment itself. The reality is, most escapes happen in low security facilities and often involve non-violent offenders, not the high-risk inmates sentenced for life. These concerns alone don't justify something as final and irreversible as a death penalty. If we invest in ballot training and modern system, life imprisonment became a safer, more ethical alternative than the death penalty. Now, let's talk about justice. People claim that the death penalty brings justice and closure to the families of victims. From this perspective, capital punishment ensures a punishment proportionate to the crime and offers families a peace of mind. But in reality, the long and painful legal process often prolongs their grief. Appeals and delays force families to relive the trauma again and again. Life sentence, on the other hand, provides quicker resolutions for the families, allowing them to move forward. Throughout this thesis, we've explored why the death penalty fails as a just punishment. It reinforces bias, it doesn't reduce crime, drains public money, and risks innocent life. At its core, it contradicts the very ethical values we, as a society, choose to uphold. Imagine if Cameron Todd Willingham was still alive today. His story shows the irreversible damage of that penalty. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Our justice system should reflect mercy, not vengeance. Because the Bible says, "Vengeance is mine, says the Lord." True justice should reform, not kill. Change starts with us. Speak out. Support organizations like Amnesty International or the Innocence Project. Spread news, spread facts in social media. Host events to challenge common myths. Every step matters. So ask yourself this: will we keep defending a system that fails to protect what it claims? Or will we build a new one that values humanity and justice? The time to act is now, because true justice don't take lives, it protects it. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Our panelists today are Mr. Abed and Ms. Prue. Go ahead, Mr. Abed, you can start.
Fine, that's fine. I'll go first. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
I think you did great job. I mean, your delivery, your physical, you're using physical body, and then your memory is also excellent, yeah. And yeah, I would like to clarify just a few things first. In the third page, you wrote this sentence: "Justice should be a balanced scale, but the death penalty tips it with the weight of irreversible mistakes." Can you
yes.
explain that?
Basically, you see, like our justice system is currently broken, and like something like that shouldn't have a punishment that is as irreversible as a death penalty. So for the death penalty to exist in our currently broken justice system, I believe like it's something that shouldn't happen. So it tips out the definitions of justice in a way, because justice is not only about retribution, but it also focuses on healing too, because we need balance in life.
Don't you think time is also irreversible? What I mean is like even deciding 5 years in prison is also irreversible, right?
Yeah, but
Because
like
they have spent time,
yeah.
which irreversible.
Although it's more worse than like we cannot bring back someone that's dead, right? Once the execution is carried out, we cannot, like, when we discover their mistakes, we cannot revive them back. Well, even though time is also like irreversible, it still gives them another second chance to live.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation. And then on your first point, you're mentioning about the flow of the justice itself, that it's discriminatory, right?
Yes.
So isn't it better to fix the system rather than abolishing it? What I'm thinking is because like this, like for example, you're saying that the rich will have these benefits more than the poor, right?
Yeah.
Their sentence maybe like less years than the poor, may be sentenced like a death sentence, right? But isn't it also true that if the system is still like that, then that penalty will be better for the rich one, because then they cannot like play with the system. They can go out during several times of the years, and they have live a comfortable life in the prison. Don't you think it's better to fix the system rather than abolish the that penalty?
I understand your perspective, but here's the thing. Our justice system is made by humans, and humans are always prone to mistakes. So, like, we can't completely make the justice system 100% perfect because they just don't exist here. So, it is like the death penalty can exist if our justice system is perfect, but theoretically, like, it's impossible to achieve that. So, I believe we cannot really fix the death penalty is better off to be abolished, and we need to focus on fixing the system to make it like more better compared to worse, the one that we currently have.
So what would you suggest to this case scenario, yeah, where when the rich, like for Indonesia, we have heard a lot of corruptors
Yeah.
living a very comfortable life in prison. What do you suggest to the like the court system, or the consequence for that case to the rich, while the poor is even like when they still rise to it, and they were like sentenced crazily
Yeah.
unfair, right? So what would you suggest? What would you suggest?
So you see, like from there, the core problem is the people itself, and like how the corruption is, or like, in Indonesia, it's quite a common thing, and like it's pretty extreme, as corruption is very normalized now. So instead, we should like change from the people itself, because abolishing the death penalty won't change anything, and like, the death penalty is basically using violence to stop violence, but that won't stop the cycle of violence and instead continue it. So to stop violence, we need to ensure to make a society that won't create violence in the first place. So the core itself is the people. Do you understand?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I understand. That's really true, but I don't think whether it's realistic or not, but that's fine. I just have one last question for you. I think
Yes.
this is more like your response or your thought about what I'm gonna say, yeah? So, Jesus was able to perform salvation because he was that sentence, right?
Mm.
How would you respond to that?
You see, back in that days, that sentence is like normalized, right? The crucifixion is pretty normalized. Like even in the Old Testament, the Bible can be seen as defending the death sentence because it was like written back in their day, and it's different now currently, and like God already give, like, Jesus is going to complete all the laws and all that, so he cannot go back to his words, and perhaps kind of resonates, kind of fulfilled what he says when Jesus died from execution.
So you're saying that it's okay to change it now, while back then Jesus was also.
Because it's all like depending on the current timeline and the current culture at that day, at that time too. because that sentence, all this laws depends on the government at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Grace.
All right, thanks, Grace. Let's give it to Ms. Prue.
Great. Good job. Again, not against you,
Yeah.
just against your ideas, and genuinely against your ideas. I am actually all for death penalty. Just saying, because then you opened up interesting conversation with Mr. Abed, but I'm not going to touch that yet. Let me ask first you mentioned about the schizophrenic person.
Yes.
Are you aware that schizophrenic is actually genetical?
No.
Okay, so I'm ADHD.
Yeah.
And all these psychological problems that you can find in the DSM, schizophrenic, ADHD, autism, and all of the funky stuff, those are genetical. Okay? As an ADHD, if I commit a crime, death penalty is a great idea. Because it will actually remind me of, one, the consequences are really bad, and two, I will not reproduce any more kids. What is your opinion on that?
You don't need to realize about your mistakes just for you to be executed, because life sentence actually gave criminals a moment of realization of their own mistakes. And I believe life sentence without parole doesn't let them go back to society, so it also erased the probability of reproducing.
That's fair. Until you mention our justice system. Who is which justice system are you referring? Are you referring to Indonesia or are you referring to the whole world?
Globally.
Okay. Since you mentioned globally, we have a lot of problems of criminals all over the place. And unlike certain countries who can manage these prisons properly, you have also mentioned, and Mr. Abed has also mentioned, there are countries like ours that cannot manage these prisons properly. Isn't it a great idea to just kill them off and just finish it? We have a lot of people. What do you think of that?
That is an interesting approach, but it's quite derogatory to humans, no? We don't you don't really think that each person have their own soul in a way. So justice should be in your perspective, you're implying that justice is vengeance, not in the form of mercy, and it's pretty inhumane. Saying how you can won't you just kill them all? We still have a lot of people left.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned humanity and you mentioned humane, do you know how the firing squad works?
No.
Okay. So basically, in Indonesia, there's basically 5 people, and then 3 of them is with bullets, and 2 of them are empty. And you're supposed to fire it, and so we do not know which bullet kills the person. Okay? Now, do you know how a fish is humanely killed?
On the brain, right?
Precisely.
That's
Now, isn't that the same? With a firing squad.
Are you comparing humans to animals?
No, I mean, since you mentioned about humanity of the process of the death sentence itself, why is it that a fish can receive such humane process of death, while the concept of humane itself is based on humans? Why can't we do that on humans?
Because humans are complex creatures, and I'll take this from a biblical perspective, all right? God created us from His own. Yes. So it's already clear that we have difference compared humans and animals, and we need to roll over the animals and all that. So I believe there's already the difference between that.
One last one that I also built on Mr. Abed's conversation with you. So you mentioned because Mr. Abed asked about like, hey, Jesus died of a death penalty. Not only did Jesus die of the death penalty, is that the reason why our Christian faith, without the Bible, strives so well with the death of many martyrs. So isn't the idea of death penalty is actually a good idea to be just there to ensure that, our faith, in fact, our faith is being known to like strive better in a lot of adversities. So just keep it there.
That's back in the dead days. Now, currently, if we keep the death penalty here, we have like more risk, including execution of the innocent people, and yeah.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay. There's a few questions that I've got several from the audience, and some of these sort of relate maybe a little bit to what's been asked already. But one of the big concerns is just the corruption in Indonesia. If you have someone who's killed a lot of people, but they've got a lot of money, and they get put in the prison system, it's only a matter of time before someone gets them out, some would say. How do you respond to that? Isn't it better just to go ahead and take care of it and get them out of off the face of the earth so they can't do that again?
Right. It is logically more effective that way, but once again, we're gambling with death, the process of life and death, and like it's not a light thing for us humans especially to do that. We as humans don't know the capacity of someone if they can change or not, so we shouldn't like judge them. And I believe like capital life imprisonment already give enough justice because it lets them. That's why like we need to get rid of the corruption first, but like capital life sentence, especially without parole, make sure that criminal won't be able to go back to society again.
Yeah, some are concerned that the victims, the families of the victims won't ever receive justice. And so what do you say to that? Doesn't that give them a sense of justice having been, to receive justice if the killer has been put to death?
I believe this justice is more of an emotional sense. So like, you see, justice should be rational and not emotional, because if it is like reasonable to see like if the victims don't feel like they receive justice, especially when the criminals aren't executed yet. But closure doesn't only come from execution of somebody, but also from like support from the society, and also reassurance that the same crime won't happen again. So to just say like, and also like life imprisonment already gives enough justice, because especially life imprisonment without parole gives the criminal to live the rest of their life recognizing their own like mistakes.
Okay. And one of your arguments was about how inhumane the death penalty is. And some might argue that, sticking someone in a cold cell and feeding them bad food for the rest of their lives until they die is pretty inhumane also. How would you argue that one is less humane or more humane than the other?
Can I give it some time? Okay, so the death penalty, like how's life imprisonment more humane compared to death penalty? First of all, what's the definition of humane in this context? My definition is that life imprisonment still gives people second chances to live, while the death penalty completely abolishes it. And also, like, I believe that's more humane. Yeah.
Okay. And so one other thing that's been discussed here is what's the purpose of the legal system anyway? Are we trying to punish people who did crimes? And if punishment is the main thing, then it seems like maybe the eye for the eye, life for the life thing, maybe that makes sense if that's the key to the justice system is giving out punishment. Is that what the justice system
No.
is supposed to do, or what is it supposed to do?
Because the justice system needs also like balance. It doesn't always need to be like focused on punishment, but also focus on healing and rehabilitation and fixing all the problems in society.
Okay, good answer. Let's see if I can find another question. Do you guys have anything else, Prue, Mr. Abed?
The violence with violence one.
Yeah.
You mentioned we by having a death penalty, we are actually literally doing violence. We're just giving violence with violence. But isn't that what teenagers do?
Yeah, if that's what teenagers do, we shouldn't put that
So,
perspective.
Right. Then, if that's how it works, and we obviously seen that nothing changes even after the years, that violence after violence, it still happens anyways. Shouldn't a punishment that scares to death would stop such things?
So
Just for
Yeah, I know.
additional argument, because that's exactly what happened to teenagers, right? You guys are scared to death of something before you guys stop.
Explosion.
Yep, there, mentioned there, right there, expulsion.
But that is theoretically, it's logical to think like that. But we have evidence to prove that, the data I provided, even with the existence of death penalty, the crime doesn't actually reduce because you see, when people actually commit crime, they didn't think rationally, oh, if I do this, I'll be sentenced to death. No, they did it impulsively because they're overwhelmed with emotions or other things. So I believe that imposing the death penalty doesn't actually reduce the crime.
And one more from your peers. There are several who have, again, several of these questions talk about corruption in Indonesia. And some would say, forget necessarily the death penalty for murderers. How about the death penalty for corruption, for corruptors? In fact, there happens to be a thesis coming up on that. How would you respond to that? I mean, wouldn't that clean the system out?
Oh, okay.
Wouldn't that clean the system out?
Okay, so justice is universal and it affects all of society. And shouldn't just the death penalty just for corruption? Here's the thing, the people we sentence to life, the people we sentence might not even be the person who did the corruption, but might be the under person, yeah. So mistakes can happen, and it doesn't 100% determine that the person we executed are actually the one who commit the crime. So there is still possibility of us executing the innocents.
Okay, time is up. Thank you, Grace. All right, we will meet over here for photos with Grace and her
Thank God.
friends and family. And then we will take a break for lunch and start our afternoon session at 12:15 with Helen. Thank you.